One word can destroy everything. You know that feeling. The one where you've just said something, and the moment it leaves your lips, you'd give anything to pull it back. The room shifts, the energy changes, and you realize with a sinking dread that you've just torched something precious with nothing more than a careless sentence. One wrong word, and you could lose everything. Your job, your relationship, your reputation, the trust someone spent years building with you. Gone. Because you couldn't keep your mouth shut for just one more second. We live in a world that worships words. Talk louder, speak up, make your voice heard. But what if I told you that the most powerful people you know, the ones who command real respect, who move through life with quiet confidence, who seem untouchable by drama, what if they all share one secret? They've mastered the art of silence. This isn't about becoming a mute. This isn't about swallowing your voice or letting people walk over you. This is about understanding something the ancient Stoics knew 2,000 years ago. Your tongue is either your greatest tool or your most dangerous weapon. And most of us are walking around with a loaded gun, finger on the trigger, wondering why our lives keep exploding. But here's the twist. This video isn't about learning how to speak better. It's about discovering why silence might be the most powerful skill you never learned. The cost of a loose tongue. The story of Lucas. Let me tell you about Lucas. Smart guy, witty, the kind of person who could walk into any room and have people laughing within minutes. He was that friend everyone wanted at their party, the colleague who made boring meetings bearable, the guy who always had the perfect comeback. Lucas thought his quick tongue was his superpower, until the day it became his kryptonite. It was a Thursday afternoon. Team meeting. The kind where everyone's half asleep and going through the motions. Sarah, the new team lead, was presenting some initiative about workplace culture. Lucas, sitting in the back, whispered to his buddy Mike what he thought was a harmless joke. Something about Sarah's presentation style. Something about her credentials. Something that, in his mind, was just between friends. Except Mike's mic wasn't muted. The entire room heard it. Sarah heard it. HR heard it. And in that moment, Lucas watched his career at the company evaporate. Not because of his work performance, not because of his skills, because of 15 words he thought no one else would hear. The aftermath was brutal. Not the formal discipline. That was just paperwork. It was the silence that followed. Colleagues who used to grab lunch with him suddenly had other plans. The easy camaraderie he'd built over 3 years turned into polite nods and awkward elevator rides. Sarah, to her credit, remained professional. But Lucas could see it in her eyes every time they passed in the hallway. The trust was gone. The respect was gone. He lasted 6 more months at that job. 6 months of trying to rebuild what he'd destroyed in 15 seconds. But some words, once spoken, can't be taken back. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. The worst part? It wasn't even how he really felt about Sarah. It was just his mouth running faster than his brain. A throwaway comment that threw away everything. That's when Lucas discovered Marcus Aurelius. Not through some grand philosophical awakening, but through a desperate Google search at 2 a.m. How to stop saying stupid things. And there it was, buried in a forum thread. A quote that hit him like a brick to the chest. How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it? But it wasn't just about anger. It was about impulse. It was about the split second between thought and speech where wisdom either lives or dies. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, had struggled with the same thing. The urge to speak without thinking, the cost of words released too quickly. Lucas realized something that night. His problem wasn't that he was a bad person. His problem was that he'd never learned the difference between having a thought and sharing a thought, between feeling something and saying something, between being clever and being wise. That's when silence stopped being his punishment and started being his salvation. Stoic Lesson 1. Speak less, think more. The Stoics had a phrase: "The mind that thinks before it speaks rules over the mind that speaks before it thinks." Think about the last time you said something you regretted. I'm willing to bet it happened in the space between stimulus and response. Someone said something. You felt something. And before you could process what you felt, you were already talking. Your mouth became a machine gun, firing words faster than your wisdom could load them. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, wrote about people who talk too much. He said they suffer from a particular kind of weakness, the inability to control their impulses. Not just the impulse to speak, but the deeper impulse to fill every silence, to react to every provocation, to prove themselves in every conversation. Those who talk much about themselves reveal nothing and hide everything, Seneca observed. Because when you're talking without thinking, you're not really communicating, you're just making noise. But here's what most people get wrong about silence. They think it's passive. They think it's weakness. They think if you're not talking, you're not contributing. The Stoics knew better. Silence isn't the absence of power. Silence is power in its purest form. When you pause before you speak, you're not hesitating. You're choosing. When you hold back a reactive comment, you're not being weak. You're being strategic. When you listen instead of waiting for your turn to talk, you're not being passive. You're gathering intelligence. Think about the people you most respect, the ones whose words carry weight. I guarantee they're not the ones who never stop talking. They're the ones who speak when they have something worth saying. Their silence makes their words more valuable, not less. Every word you don't say is a bullet you save for when it really matters. Stoic Lesson 2. Stop announcing your plans. Here's a question that might make you uncomfortable. When was the last time you told someone about a goal before you achieved it? Maybe it was that business idea you've been talking about for months. Maybe it was the fitness routine you announced on social media. Maybe it was the creative project you told everyone you were going to finish. And here's the follow-up question that might make you even more uncomfortable. How many of those announced goals did you actually complete? There's a psychological trap hidden in the simple act of talking about what you're going to do. Derek Sivers, in his famous TED Talk, explained the research. When you tell people about your goals, your brain gets a hit of satisfaction as if you've already accomplished them. The social recognition, the encouragement, the "wow, that sounds amazing," it all triggers the same reward pathways as actual achievement. You get the psychological payoff without doing the psychological work. Marcus Aurelius, in his personal journal that became Meditations, wrote, "The accomplishment is in the doing, not in the intention." He understood something that modern psychology has only recently confirmed. Talking about doing something can actually make you less likely to do it. But there's an even deeper issue here. When you announce your plans, you don't just rob yourself of motivation. You make yourself vulnerable to sabotage. I learned this the hard way when I was 25. I had this brilliant idea for a side business. Spent weeks developing the concept, researching the market, getting excited about the possibilities. And like most people, I couldn't keep it to myself. I told friends, I told family, I told anyone who would listen. Most people were encouraging. But there was this one friend, let's call him David, who asked all the right questions. Have you thought about the competition? Do you have enough capital? What if it doesn't work out? He positioned it as being helpful, being realistic. What he was actually doing was planting seeds of doubt. Not maliciously, necessarily. But David had tried starting his own business 2 years earlier and failed. My success would make his failure more visible, more painful. So unconsciously, he started steering me away from taking the risk. And it worked. Every conversation with David left me a little less excited, a little more worried, a little more convinced that maybe I should wait until I had more experience, more money, more certainty. I never started that business, and David never had to confront the possibility that his failure wasn't inevitable. The Stoics understood that when you share your plans prematurely, you invite the world to vote on your dreams. And the world, frankly, has a vested interest in keeping you exactly where you are. Epictetus taught his students, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Notice the order. First, decide privately. Then, act publicly. Your plans are not entertainment for others. They're not conversation starters. They're not ways to get encouragement or validation. They're blueprints for your future. And blueprints are most valuable when they're protected until they become buildings. Act first, speak later. Let your results do the announcing. Stoic Lesson 3. Listening is a superpower. In a world where everyone is fighting to be heard, the person who actually listens has supernatural power. I realized this during a conversation with my neighbor Sarah a few months ago. She'd been going through a rough divorce, and every interaction we'd had for weeks followed the same pattern. She'd start talking about her situation. I'd jump in with advice or my own related story, and she'd politely nod and change the subject. But one evening, she caught me while I was walking my dog, and something made me just listen. Really listen. Not planning what I was going to say next, not thinking about similar experiences I'd had. Just listening to her words, watching her face, paying attention to what she wasn't saying as much as what she was. For 20 minutes, I barely spoke. I asked maybe 3 questions, all of them just to understand better, not to steer the conversation anywhere. And something remarkable happened. Sarah's entire posture changed. Her voice got steadier. She started working through her own thoughts out loud, coming to conclusions I never could have given her. By the end of the conversation, she was standing straighter, smiling for the first time in weeks. "Thank you," she said. "That's exactly what I needed to hear." But here's the thing. I hadn't told her anything. I'd just created space for her to hear herself. That's when I understood what Epictetus meant when he said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Listening isn't just polite behavior. It's not just being nice. Listening is a form of power that most people never learn to use. When you really listen to someone, not just waiting for your turn to talk, but actually absorbing what they're saying, several things happen simultaneously. First, you gather information, real information, not just the surface-level stuff, but the emotional subtext, the hidden concerns, the real motivations. While everyone else is busy broadcasting, you're receiving intelligence that gives you a massive advantage in every relationship, every negotiation, every conflict. Second, you make the other person feel valued. And when someone feels truly heard, they don't just like you more. They trust you more. They want to be around you more. They start seeing you as someone who gets it, someone who understands, someone worth confiding in. Third, you avoid the trap of reactive communication. When you're really listening, you can't be formulating your comeback. You can't be getting defensive. You can't be preparing your own story to tell. You have to be present. And presence is where wisdom lives. I started experimenting with this. In meetings, instead of being the person with all the ideas, I became the person who asked the best questions. In social situations, instead of being the entertainer, I became the person who made others feel interesting. In conflicts, instead of defending my position, I started by really trying to understand the other person's position. The results were remarkable. People started seeking out my opinion more, not less. They started valuing my input more, not less. Because when I did speak, it was clear I'd been paying attention. My words carried weight because I'd earned the right to be heard. But here's what surprised me most. Listening made me smarter. When you're not busy formulating your response, you actually absorb what's being said. You notice patterns. You pick up on things other people miss. You start seeing solutions that weren't visible when you were focused on being heard rather than hearing. Silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's the presence of attention. And in a world full of noise, attention is the scarcest, most valuable resource you can offer. Stoic Lesson 4. Don't speak in anger. Anger is gasoline. Words are the spark. And most of us walk around with both, wondering why our relationships keep exploding. Seneca wrote extensively about anger, calling it temporary madness. But his most powerful insight wasn't about anger itself. It was about the irreversible damage we do when we speak from that place of temporary madness. Anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than to anything on which it is poured. But the vessel isn't the only thing that gets damaged. It's everything the acid touches when it spills over. I learned this lesson the hard way during an argument with my brother 3 years ago. We were discussing family finances, already a loaded topic, and he said something that I interpreted as questioning my judgment. In that moment, I felt that familiar surge of heat, that tightening in my chest that signals anger taking over. And I let it. I said things I didn't mean. I brought up old grievances that had nothing to do with the current issue. I questioned his character, his motives, his intelligence. I used my knowledge of his insecurities like weapons, going for maximum damage. The argument ended with him walking out. We didn't speak for 6 months. 6 months of family gatherings where we avoided each other. 6 months of our parents walking on eggshells, trying not to mention one of us to the other. 6 months of regret knowing that 15 minutes of verbal warfare had damaged a relationship that took 30 years to build. The worst part? I don't even remember what triggered the argument. But I remember every word I said in anger. And so does he. That's when I discovered Leo Woman's technique of the unsent message. When you feel that surge of anger, that need to respond immediately, you write out exactly what you want to say. All of it. Every harsh word, every accusation, every bit of venom. You pour it all into a message, an email, a letter, and then you don't send it. You save it as a draft. You put it in a folder. You sleep on it. And then, in the morning, when the emotional storm has passed, you read what you almost said. Most of the time, you'll be grateful you didn't send it. Not because your feelings weren't valid, but because expressing those feelings in that way would have created more problems than it solved. Sometimes, there's still something worth saying. But now you can say it from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. You can address the issue without attacking the person. You can express your feelings without weaponizing them. The Stoics understood that anger isn't necessarily wrong. It's often a signal that something important to you is being threatened. But acting from anger almost always makes the situation worse, not better. Marcus Aurelius developed a practice. When someone said or did something that triggered his anger, he would pause and ask himself, what virtue is this person lacking that leads them to behave this way? Instead of seeing malice, he looked for ignorance. Instead of seeing an enemy, he saw someone who hadn't learned better yet. This isn't about being a doormat. This isn't about suppressing legitimate feelings or avoiding necessary conflicts. This is about recognizing that your emotional state determines the quality of your communication. And angry communication almost never achieves what you actually want to achieve. When you're angry, your goal shifts from solving the problem to winning the argument, from understanding the other person to defeating them, from preserving the relationship to proving you're right. And in that shift, everybody loses. The next time you feel that surge of anger, that need to respond immediately, try this. Tell yourself you'll address the issue in 24 hours. Not ignore it. Address it. But give yourself time to cool down, to think clearly, to remember what you actually want to accomplish. Your future self will thank you, and so will everyone else in your life. Stoic Lesson 5. Filter your vulnerability. Vulnerability has become a buzzword. We're told to be authentic, to share our struggles, to open up about our challenges. And there's truth in that. Genuine connections require genuine sharing. But somewhere along the way, we've confused vulnerability with oversharing. We've started treating our personal struggles like social currency, spending them freely to buy connection, attention, or sympathy. The Stoics understood something we've forgotten. Not every ear deserves your story. I learned this at a dinner party 2 years ago. It was one of those evenings where the wine was flowing and the conversation had turned deep. People were sharing stories about their childhoods, their fears, their biggest regrets. The atmosphere felt safe, intimate. So I shared something I'd never told anyone outside my immediate family. A story about a mistake I'd made years earlier, something I was still processing, still healing from. It felt good to finally voice it, to be met with understanding nods and supportive words. 3 weeks later, I heard my story being told at another gathering. Not by me, by someone who'd been at that dinner party. They were using it as an example in some point they were making, sharing details I'd only confided to that intimate group. The betrayal wasn't intentional. They probably didn't even think of it as a betrayal. But my private struggle had become their conversation starter. My vulnerability had become their content. That's when I encountered Molo Sebrian's insight. Vulnerability is not social currency. It's not a tool for building instant intimacy. It's not a way to stand out in a conversation or prove your authenticity. Real vulnerability is strategic. It's selective. It's about sharing the right thing with the right person at the right time for the right reasons. The Stoics believed in concentric circles of trust. Your innermost circle, maybe 3 to 5 people, gets access to your deepest struggles, your unprocessed emotions, your current battles. The next circle gets your lessons learned, your growth stories, your retrospective insights. The outer circles get your principles, your values, your wisdom distilled. Everyone doesn't need to know everything about you. In fact, indiscriminate sharing doesn't make you more authentic. It makes you less powerful. When you share your struggles with people who haven't earned that level of trust, several things happen. First, you lose control of your story. Once you tell someone something personal, you can't control how they interpret it, who they share it with, or how they use it. Second, you invite judgment you're not prepared for. Not everyone has the emotional intelligence or life experience to hold your struggles with care. Some people will use your vulnerability against you, consciously or unconsciously. Third, you dilute the impact of your sharing. When you tell everyone everything, your words lose their power. The people who truly deserve your trust start to feel like just another audience member. But here's the subtler danger. When you overshare, you often do it to avoid doing the internal work of processing your experiences. Talking about a problem can feel like solving it, but it's not the same thing. Sometimes, working through something privately, journaling, reflecting, seeking professional help, is more valuable than broadcasting it to your social circle. This doesn't mean becoming closed off or pretending you don't have struggles. It means being intentional about who gets access to which parts of your story. Ask yourself, why am I sharing this? What do I hope to gain? Is this person equipped to hold this information responsibly? Have they earned this level of trust? Your story is one of your most valuable possessions. Don't give it away for free to people who haven't invested in you. Stoic Lesson 6. Silence commands respect. Leonardo da Vinci once wrote, "Nothing strengthens authority so much as silence." Most people have this backwards. They think authority comes from having the loudest voice, the quickest comeback, the last word. They think respect is earned by talking your way into it. But watch the people who command real respect. Not fear, not compliance, but genuine respect. They're not the ones who never stop talking. They're the ones who speak with intention, who pause before responding, who let their presence fill the space that others try to fill with words. I saw this principle in action during a family argument last Christmas. My Uncle Tom and my cousin Mike were in one of their typical political debates, voices rising, talking over each other, each trying to score points. The whole family was walking on eggshells, waiting for someone to say something they couldn't take back. Then my grandmother, 92 years old, barely 5 feet tall, simply looked at both of them and said nothing, just made eye contact, held it for about 3 seconds, and waited. The room went silent. Not because she'd yelled or made threats or pulled rank, because her silence carried more weight than all their words combined. In that pause, both men seemed to remember where they were, who they were talking to, what really mattered. "We can agree to disagree," Tom said finally. And that was the end of it. That's the power of strategic silence. It doesn't demand attention. It commands it. But most people are afraid of silence. They rush to fill every pause, to smooth over every awkward moment, to keep the conversation moving. They think silence is weakness, that it makes them look unprepared or unengaged. The Stoics knew better. They understood that silence is often the strongest response you can give. When someone insults you, Silence forces them to sit with their words, to hear how they sound without the validation of your reaction. When someone is trying to provoke you, silence refuses to play their game, leaving them arguing with themselves. When someone is sharing something important, silence gives them space to say what they really mean, not just what they think you want to hear. But here's the key. Strategic silence isn't about being passive or avoidant. It's about being intentional. It's the difference between not knowing what to say and choosing not to say it. Try this experiment. In your next heated conversation, instead of jumping in with your counterpoint, pause for 3 full seconds. Make eye contact. Breathe. Then respond, or don't. Watch what happens. Most of the time, the other person will either moderate their tone or reveal more about their real position. Sometimes they'll realize they've been unreasonable and self-correct. Sometimes the pause will diffuse the tension entirely. This isn't manipulation. It's wisdom. You're giving the conversation space to breathe, giving both of you time to think, creating an opportunity for real communication instead of reactive noise. In business meetings, the person who speaks less but chooses their words carefully often has more influence than the person who talks the most. In social situations, the person who listens more than they talk often becomes the center of attention. In conflicts, the person who remains calm and measured often wins the respect of everyone watching. Silence isn't the absence of strength. It's strength in its most refined form. Stoic Lesson 7. Results speak louder. There's a story about a mountain climber named Madison that perfectly illustrates this principle. Madison had been training for months to summit a particularly challenging peak. Every week, she posted updates on social media, photos from the gym, videos of her practicing with equipment, long captions about her motivation, her fears, her determination. Her feed became a documentary of her preparation. Friends and followers cheered her on, offered encouragement, shared her posts. She built a whole community around her upcoming climb. And then, nothing. The posts stopped. The updates disappeared. When people asked what happened, Madison gave vague answers about timing and weather conditions. The truth was simpler. She'd never actually scheduled the climb. All that posting, all that documenting, all that public commitment. It had given her the emotional satisfaction of achievement without requiring the actual achievement. She'd gotten so much validation for preparing to do something that she'd lost the motivation to actually do it. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the most powerful man in the ancient world, never posted emperor mode activated or stoic discipline locked in. His philosophical insights weren't shared as inspirational quotes on social media. They were private reflections, written in personal journals, meant to guide his own behavior rather than impress an audience. He understood something we've forgotten. The more you talk about doing something, the less likely you are to do it. Modern research confirms this. When we announce our goals, our brains release dopamine, the same neurochemical reward we get from actually accomplishing those goals. We get the satisfaction without the struggle, the recognition without the results. But there's a deeper issue here. When you constantly narrate your progress, you shift your focus from the work itself to the story about the work. You start performing your life instead of living it. I fell into this trap when I decided to get in shape a few years ago. I documented everything. Before photos, workout videos, meal prep pics, motivational quotes overlaid on sunset photos. My fitness journey became content for my social media. And for a while, it worked. The likes and comments were motivating. People would tell me I was inspiring them. I felt accountable to my online audience. But something strange happened. I started choosing workouts based on how they would look on camera rather than what my body needed. I picked restaurants for the aesthetic of their healthy options rather than what actually fueled me well. I found myself spending more time crafting the perfect post about my workout than actually working out. The process became performance, and performance, by definition, is about the audience, not the participant. That's when I went silent. No more progress pics, no more workout updates, no more motivational captions, just the work itself. And something remarkable happened. My results improved dramatically. When I wasn't performing my fitness journey, I could focus on actually experiencing it. When I wasn't worried about how my story looked to others, I could write it authentically for myself. The Stoics believed in what they called preferred indifference, outcomes that are nice to have but shouldn't be the source of your motivation. Recognition, praise, external validation, these are preferred indifference. It's fine if they come, but your work shouldn't depend on them. Your real progress is invisible to social media. The mental strength you build by showing up when you don't feel like it. The discipline you develop by doing the work when no one is watching. The character you forge in the private moments between public victories. Start something. Don't announce it. Just begin. Work on it consistently. Don't document every step. Just show up. Finish it. Then, if you want, share what you've accomplished. Let your results be your announcement. Let your achievement be your content. Let your changed life be your inspiration to others. The world has enough people talking about what they're going to do. It needs more people quietly doing the work. Stoic Lesson 8. Stop making complaints. Your conversation starter. I hate my job. This weather is awful. Traffic was insane. I'm so stressed. I can't believe what's happening in the world. Sound familiar? For most people, complaining has become the default mode of social interaction. It's how we bond with strangers, connect with colleagues, and fill awkward silences. But complaining is more than just negative talk. It's a subtle form of self-sabotage that keeps you trapped in the very situations you claim to want to escape. Borja Vilaseca, a modern philosopher, uses the metaphor of a stone in your shoe. When you have a stone in your shoe, you have two options. You can take off your shoe and remove the stone, or you can keep walking and complain about how much your foot hurts. Most people choose option 2. They keep the stone because complaining about it gets them attention, sympathy, and connection with others who also have stones in their shoes. But here's what the Stoics understood. Complaining is the ego's addiction. It makes you feel important, your problems matter, connected, others share your struggles, and righteous, you're the victim of circumstances. It gives you all the emotional benefits of solving your problems without requiring you to actually solve them. I realized I was addicted to complaining during a conversation with my friend Rachel. We'd grabbed coffee, and I spent the first 20 minutes telling her about everything wrong with my life. My boss was unreasonable. My apartment was too expensive. Dating was impossible. My family was demanding. Rachel listened patiently, but when I paused, she asked a simple question. What are you going to do about it? The question stopped me cold, because the honest answer was, nothing. I wasn't looking for solutions. I was looking for validation that my problems were real and that I was justified in feeling frustrated. That's when I understood what Epictetus meant when he said, It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Complaining is a reaction that makes you weaker, not stronger. Every time you voice a complaint without taking action, you reinforce your sense of powerlessness. You train your brain to see problems as permanent features of your reality, rather than temporary obstacles to overcome. But here's the subtler danger. Complaining becomes your brand. People start seeing you as the person who's always dealing with some crisis, always overwhelmed, always struggling. You become exhausting to be around because every conversation becomes a therapy session. This doesn't mean you should never acknowledge problems or seek support from friends. It means being intentional about the difference between processing challenges and wallowing in them. Instead of, "I hate my job," try, "I'm looking for a new position that's a better fit." Instead of, "Dating is impossible," try, "I'm learning what I really want in a partner." Instead of, "My family is so demanding," try, "I'm working on setting better boundaries." The language shift isn't just cosmetic. It's psychological. It moves you from victim to agent, from problem-focused to solution-focused, from helpless to empowered. But the real solution isn't changing how you talk about your problems. It's changing how you think about them. The Stoics taught a simple but powerful reframe. Every complaint is really just an unaccepted responsibility. You hate your job? That's your responsibility to find a better one or find ways to improve your current situation. You're stressed about money? That's your responsibility to earn more, spend less, or both. You're frustrated with your relationships? That's your responsibility to communicate better, set clearer boundaries, or choose different people to invest in. This isn't about victim blaming or ignoring real systemic problems. It's about reclaiming your power by focusing on what you can control rather than what you can't. Try this experiment. For 1 week, every time you catch yourself about to complain, pause and ask, "What can I do about this?" Sometimes the answer will be nothing, and that's okay. Some things really are outside your control. But most of the time, you'll realize there's at least one small action you could take. Take that action instead of voicing the complaint. Watch how different you feel, how differently people respond to you, how your problems start to feel more manageable and less overwhelming. The goal isn't to become unrealistically positive or pretend problems don't exist. The goal is to become someone who faces problems with agency rather than accepting them with resignation. Stoic Lesson 9. Say no without guilt. Can you stay late to finish this project? Will you help me move this weekend? Would you mind covering my shift? Could you lend me some money? How many times have you said yes when you meant no? How many times have you taken on obligations you didn't want, agreed to favors you couldn't afford, or committed to things that drained your energy and time? Most people are terrible at saying no. Not because they're generous or kind-hearted, but because they're afraid. Afraid of disappointing people. Afraid of being seen as selfish. Afraid of missing out. Afraid of conflict. But the Stoics understood something that modern people have forgotten. Saying yes to everything means saying no to what matters most. Rafael Nadal, the tennis champion, once said, "I learned very early that to be successful, you have to say no to many good things in order to say yes to the great things." Notice he didn't say you have to say no to bad things. Anyone can turn down obviously bad opportunities. The real challenge is saying no to good things. Requests that make sense. Opportunities that sound interesting. People you care about asking for reasonable favors. I learned this lesson during one of the busiest periods of my career. I was juggling multiple projects, trying to build a side business, and maintaining relationships with friends and family. Every week brought new requests for my time. Could I join this committee, attend that event, help with this project, provide feedback on that proposal? I said yes to almost everything, not because I had unlimited time or energy, but because each individual request seemed reasonable. How could I say no to helping a friend? How could I turn down a networking opportunity? How could I skip a family obligation? The result was predictable. I did everything poorly. My main work suffered because I was distracted by side projects. My side business stagnated because I couldn't give it focused attention. My relationships suffered because I was constantly stressed and overwhelmed. I was saying yes with my words, but no with my actions. I was committing to things I couldn't deliver on, disappointing people I was trying to please, and burning myself out in the process. That's when I discovered the power of the phrase, "Let me think about it." Most requests for your time aren't emergencies, even when they're presented as such. Most people asking for favors can wait 24 hours for an answer. And in that 24-hour window, you can evaluate the request honestly rather than reactively. When someone asks for your time, attention, or resources, instead of giving an immediate yes or no, try saying, "That sounds important. Let me check my schedule and get back to you." This simple phrase does several things. First, it buys you time to think clearly. When you're put on the spot, your brain defaults to people-pleasing mode. You say yes to avoid the immediate discomfort of potentially disappointing someone. But when you have time to reflect, you can make decisions based on your actual priorities rather than your social anxiety. Second, it signals that your time has value. When you immediately say yes to requests, you train people to see your time as always available, infinitely flexible. When you need to check your schedule first, you remind both yourself and others that your time is a limited resource that needs to be allocated thoughtfully. Third, it allows you to craft a thoughtful response. If you're going to say no, you can explain your reasoning clearly. If you're going to say yes, you can set clear boundaries around your commitment. But here's the key. When you do say no, say it clearly and without excessive justification. "I won't be able to help with that project. That doesn't fit in my schedule right now. I'm not available that weekend." Not, "I'm so sorry. I wish I could, but I have this thing, and my schedule is crazy, and maybe next time if you give me more notice." Excessive justification does two harmful things. It makes you sound unsure of your decision, inviting negotiation or guilt-tripping, and it teaches people that your boundaries are up for debate if they can just find the right argument. Your reasons for saying no are valid simply because they're your reasons. You don't owe anyone a detailed explanation for how you choose to spend your time and energy. This isn't about being rude or inconsiderate. It's about being honest and direct. Most people actually respect clear boundaries more than wishy-washy explanations. They know where they stand with you, and they don't waste time trying to change your mind. The Stoics believed that every yes is also a no. When you say yes to one thing, you're automatically saying no to everything else you could be doing with that time. The question isn't whether you should ever say no. You're already saying no to countless things every day. The question is whether you're saying no consciously or unconsciously, strategically or randomly. Start treating your time like the finite, valuable resource it is. Every hour you give away is an hour you can't spend on your priorities, your relationships, your health, your goals. Make sure the things you're saying yes to are worth what you're saying no to. Stoic Lesson 10. Stop justifying everything. Do you find yourself explaining your choices to people who didn't ask? Defending decisions that don't affect anyone else? Providing detailed rationales for how you spend your money, your time, your energy? Most people live their lives in an invisible courtroom, constantly on trial for their choices, always ready with evidence to prove they're making the right decisions. But here's what the Stoics understood. When you're constantly justifying yourself, you're giving other people power over your life. Epictetus taught his students, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Every time you feel compelled to explain why you made a particular choice, you're implicitly asking for permission to live your own life. You're treating other people's opinions as more important than your own judgment. I discovered this pattern in myself during a conversation with my extended family about my decision to move to a smaller city. Instead of simply sharing my news, I found myself launching into a detailed explanation. The cost of living was lower, the quality of life was better, I could work remotely, the schools were good even though I didn't have kids yet, the commute would be easier, the community was more connected. I kept talking until my cousin interrupted me. You don't have to convince us. It's your life. She was right. I was trying to convince them because I was trying to convince myself. I was seeking external validation for a decision I'd already made, treating their approval as necessary for my peace of mind. But their approval wasn't necessary. Their understanding wasn't required. Their agreement wouldn't make my decision better, and their disagreement wouldn't make it worse. This pattern shows up everywhere once you start noticing it. I bought this expensive coffee machine because I calculated that I'll save money compared to buying coffee out every day, and the quality is better, and it's more convenient. I'm not dating anyone right now because I'm focusing on my career, and I want to work on myself first, and the timing just isn't right. I chose this restaurant because it has good reviews, and it's not too expensive, and they have options for everyone. In each case, the justification reveals insecurity. You're not sharing information. You're seeking approval. You're not explaining your reasoning. You're defending your right to make your own choices. The Stoics practiced what they called preferred indifference toward other people's opinions. It's nice when people approve of your choices, but their approval shouldn't be necessary for your confidence in those choices. Try this experiment. For 1 week, when people ask about your decisions, give simple, direct answers without justification. Why did you choose that restaurant? It looked good. Why aren't you drinking tonight? I don't feel like it. Why did you quit your job? It wasn't working for me. Notice what happens. Most of the time, people accept your simple answer and move on. The elaborate justifications you thought were necessary weren't necessary at all. But sometimes, people will push back. They'll ask follow-up questions, express disagreement, or try to change your mind. This is where the real practice begins. Their pushback isn't a signal that you need to justify yourself more thoroughly. It's information about them, not about you. Some people are uncomfortable with others making different choices because it highlights the possibility that their own choices aren't inevitable. When you live your life without constantly seeking approval, you give other people permission to do the same. When you make decisions based on your own values rather than other people's expectations, you model what authentic living looks like. This doesn't mean being secretive or refusing to share your thought process when it's genuinely helpful. It means distinguishing between sharing and defending, between explaining and justifying, between communicating and convincing. Your life is not a democracy. Other people don't get to vote on your choices. Their opinions are data points you can consider, but they're not verdicts you have to accept. Live your life like you mean it. Make your choices like you trust yourself. Stop asking for permission to be who you are. The real power of silence. We started with a simple truth. One word can destroy everything. But here's the deeper truth we've discovered. One pause can save everything. Every moment between stimulus and response is a choice point. Every breath before you speak is an opportunity. Every second of silence is a chance to choose wisdom over impulse, connection over reaction, strength over weakness. The power of silence isn't passive. It's not about becoming a doormat or swallowing your voice. It's about understanding that in a world drowning in noise, the person who speaks with intention commands attention. In relationships filled with reactive communication, the person who pauses before responding becomes trusted. In conflicts driven by ego and emotion, the person who chooses their words carefully becomes respected. But the deepest power of silence is internal. Every time you pause before speaking in anger, you strengthen your emotional control. Every time you listen instead of waiting for your turn to talk, you deepen your understanding. Every time you work in private instead of announcing your plans, you build real discipline. Every time you choose not to complain, you reclaim your agency. These are invisible victories. No one sees the argument you didn't start, the gossip you didn't spread, the reactive comment you didn't make. No one applauds you for the goal you pursued quietly, the boundary you maintained without explanation, the complaint you transformed into action. But these invisible victories are what build real character. They're what create lasting peace. They're what forge the kind of inner strength that doesn't need external validation because it knows its own worth. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, wrote his deepest insights in private journals. He understood that the most important conversations happen within yourself. The most crucial victories happen in moments when no one is watching. The most powerful words are often the ones you choose not to say. This isn't about becoming silent. It's about becoming selective. It's about understanding that your words, like your time and energy, are finite resources that deserve to be invested wisely. Speak to connect, not to impress. Speak to solve, not to win. Speak to build, not to destroy. And when in doubt, pause. Breathe. Choose silence until you can choose words that make the world better, not just louder. The choice is yours. Right now, you have a choice. You can continue living reactively, letting your tongue run ahead of your wisdom, wondering why your relationships feel shallow and your progress feels slow. You can keep filling every silence with noise, mistaking volume for value, confusion for contribution. Or you can start now. You can begin treating your words like the powerful tools they are. You can practice the ancient art of strategic silence. You can discover what the Stoics knew, that the person who controls their tongue controls their life. This isn't about perfection. You'll still say things you regret. You'll still speak too quickly sometimes, share too much occasionally, react when you meant to respond. But each time you catch yourself, each time you pause before speaking, each time you choose silence over noise, you're building the muscle of wisdom. The world doesn't need more people talking about what they're going to do. It needs more people quietly doing the work. It doesn't need more people announcing their opinions. It needs more people living their values. It doesn't need more noise. It needs more signal. Every invisible victory over the impulse to speak makes you stronger. Every moment of chosen silence plants the seed of lasting peace. And in a world where everyone is fighting to be heard, the quiet one becomes unforgettable. Control your tongue, and you'll control your life. If you made it this far, if these words resonated with something deep inside you, if you're ready to discover the power that comes from restraint rather than reaction, write this: I choose silence that builds, not words that destroy. Because in the end, it's not about what you say. It's about who you become in the space between thought and speech. It's about the person you build in the moments when no one is watching. It's about the quiet strength that needs no announcement, because it speaks through every action, every choice, every carefully chosen word. The power has always been yours. The choice has always been yours. The silence has always been waiting. Speak less. Mean more. The rest is just noise,